Life Audio.
Welcome to the Praying Christian Women podcast. I am Alana here with Jaime. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm okay. We were just talking off air how we both are feeling tired and rusty. So I was going to play a really mean joke on you and me and our listeners to give them an example of our topic today and tell them we are both so tired and Jamie's got a headache and I've been like in bed for 15 hours straight, but we're going to pull through this. But guys, just bear with us. And I was going to use that as an example of if we start an episode like that, that is the perfect epitome of what we're talking about today. So can you introduce us to our topic of the day so everyone knows what we're talking about?
Yes, our topic of the day is self-fulfilling prophecies. And I was actually thinking, because I just said, oh, I'm doing great, even after I just told you, oh, I'm kind of dragging, I'm not doing as great. My self-fulfilling prophecy will be, if I say it, it will be so. So I'm going to say, I'm
Yes,
doing awesome. This is going to be the best episode ever.
it probably will be.
It probably will be.
Yeah. So I've been really excited to chat about this topic. I want to piggyback this onto some of what we've been talking about with Bible memorization because I discovered that some of my Bible memorizing blocks were turning into self-fulfilling prophecies in a kind of humorous way. But before I tell you that story, can you give us just a definition so that we're all on the same page with what we're talking about here?
Yes, the Britannica definition for self-fulfilling prophecy is a process through which an originally false expectation leads to its own confirmation. In a self-fulfilling prophecy, an individual's expectations about another person or entity eventually result in the other person or entity acting in ways that confirm the expectations. So kind of in layman's terms, it's like you believe something and it comes true because you believed it.
Right. And I think that if we take the term like prophecy with a big P, like the Old Testament prophets or biblical prophecy out of it, and if we want to think about it just in terms of common sense, to me, this makes logical sense in the same way that something like the placebo effect makes logical sense. It's not going to happen every single time. It's not more powerful than God, but it makes sense that if you go to school every day and tell yourself that you're terrible at math, that you are not going to get as good of test scores in math. And so you have basically taken this prophecy with a little p that you're bad at math and you have made it come true. And sometimes the self-fulfilling prophecies are things that we say to ourselves. Sometimes they're negative, sometimes they're positive. Another self-fulfilling prophecy is when Jamie says, I feel great and we're going to have a great episode. And that lifts up our energy. And let's say she and I hadn't had this back and forth before we got on the air and I showed up sluggish and I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is going to be so hard to get through. And Jamie shows up and says, this is going to be a great episode. I'm so excited to be doing this. That can become a self-fulfilling prophecy because then I read into her excitement and buy into her excitement. And so then I tell myself, even if it's all on a subconscious level, oh, I better rise up and match her positive energy. I don't want to be the one to bring her down. Whereas if we started the show off kind of like I jokingly did, guys, we are so exhausted. If we sound terrible, bear with us. There's a lot of podcasts I listen to where they'll start by saying like, we're recording in a new spot. The acoustics are going to be strange. You and I have done it before when one of us has had to record on the phone. As a listener, I never notice until they bring it up. But
Right. Yeah.
if if you start by saying, sorry listeners, today's episode's going to be really terrible. We're going to stumble over our words all the time. Not only is it more likely that you and I are going to stumble over our words more than we otherwise might, even if we stumbled over our words the exact same number of times that we do in a typical episode, listeners would be more likely to recognize it, right? Because like, oh, they warned us. Oh, yep, there she goes again, forgetting the word that she was trying to think up. And so my story of why I've been so excited, I think I've kind of turned into a nag to you. So I might need to offer you an apology. Like, let's do self-fulfilling prophecies. And then like 2 days later, I can't wait. We're going to do can we do self-fulfilling prophecy soon? I'd really like to do self-fulfilling prophecies soon.
No, it's perfect because my mind is like a sieve and I
Oh,
don't retain
perfect.
things. So every time you say it, I'm just
That's
like,
great.
wow, what a great
What it,
idea. This is
I love
awesome.
it.
A great and
Exactly.
novel concept, even after
I
you've
wish
said
I
it
had thought
five
of that.
times. Mhm.
So you and I were talking about Bible memorization, and I loved that little mini series that we did. By mini series, I mean two-part episode. But
Mhm.
it got me thinking about some of my blocks, and I shared that historically, I had noticed a correlation between going into deep Bible memory work and going into a pretty depressive funk, like as I was starting. And for a long time, I just told myself that that was the activation energy required. And then it was like, okay, this always happens when I start memorizing a big passage, and then it's going to get better. Kind of like I tell myself the middle of a novel manuscript for me always feels kind of sluggish. And so I tell myself, it's like, Alana, you've been here before. You know it's going to pick up again. It's going to be fine. So just get through this part that doesn't feel as good. And so I started memorizing some from Romans 8. The very next day after, like, I think you and I both memorized like a verse or two because we were recording on short notice and didn't have a ton of time to work on a full passage. But like the day after I started like a whole paragraph, I was like in bed for a day. And I'm like, okay, here we go again. It was sort of
Oh,
like, yep, I called it. And so I did that thing I do where I told myself, okay, sometimes this happens. It's going to be worth it. It's going to be 2 or 3 kind of mentally sluggish days, but won't it be nice to be back into regular Bible memory work again? And I was even going to text you and be like, it happened again. But of course, when you're in that kind of funk, you don't text anybody and tell them that you're
right.
in that kind of a funk. Okay. So here's where self-fulfilling prophecy comes in. And I am like laughing hysterically on the inside because this is not a story of poor Alana who gets depressed, but then musters through it so she can memorize the Bible. By day 3, like everybody was noticing, I was going to bed at like 5 or 6 at night. Finally, Scott's like, "What's up?" I'm like, "I don't know." I didn't want to bring up the Bible memory thing to him because it just sounded silly. And then I went to the fridge where I keep a little, I think it's a pint. I had a pint of dairy-free sorbet. And that's my treats to myself. I get it on the grocery orders when Scott goes into town. He brings me back like a pint of dairy-free ice cream. So I went, I'm like, probably the sugar's not going to help, but oh well. I go to unscrew the lid. I realize this pint of ice cream that I'd been just kind of, eating through for the last week, they hadn't given me the dairy-free version. And so, like, I've
Oh.
known for over a year that dairy really messes up my brain and my inflammation and my joints and my mood. And so I just had to laugh. Like, I've been, the moment I noticed that, like, I didn't run up the stairs because my joints were not at the ability to run, but I had a lot more energy going up the stairs than I had in days to tell Scott, like, I figured it out. I'm not broken. I'm not dying. I'm not being punished for memorizing the Bible. Like, I've been eating this dairy for like a week. And so, um, but here's the thing. If I hadn't learned how to muster through that of, okay, it's going to be hard and then I'm going to get through it, I would have just quit. I would have said, yep, Bible memory leads to depression. Depression's not worth it. And if I had not been open to, you know what? Because picture me at my pridefulest worst. Could you picture this tiny bit of like, I'm so special that the devil has to punish me when I try to memorize the Bible? Do you
Well,
know
yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Oh, definitely. Because there's just like a whole theology kind of sub theology, I think, in Christian culture about, well, if the devil's not persecuting you, you're not doing it right. And kind
Exactly.
of a pride in, oh, yeah, I'm suffering these attacks because I'm doing this thing. And not
Hmm.
to say that that doesn't sometimes happen,
It
because it
can, but it
sometimes
doesn't have
does,
to.
but it doesn't have to. Right.
Yeah. So I think this was a perfect example of a self-fulfilling prophecy that in my brain, I was like, well, obviously this has to be because I started memorizing the Bible again, but it had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that I was eating like spoonfuls of dairied ice cream all week long. And I think one of the most common self-fulfilling prophecies that Christians can fall into is this idea that you just talked about. Before I do something big for God, the devil's going to come after me. And yes, we should always be aware that certain things will open us up to spiritual attack, but there's a huge difference between that and I think about Gideon. So here's the enemy army, here's the Midianites, and they hear one of their men talking about this dream he had where Gideon attacked and destroyed all of them. And so they tell themselves, "Oh, this must mean that Gideon is going to attack and destroy us all." So they're already getting into a superstitious funk. And then they hear these trumpets that Gideon is blowing, Gideon and his 300 men, who, without any type of divine intervention and without this superstitious belief that the Midianites have bought into, have no means of defeating them. But they're already primed to be prepared to be defeated by Gideon, that they kind of go crazy and turn on themselves. I don't want that to detract from the miraculous deliverance God gave the Israelites that day, but I think that even somebody who didn't believe in God, but still believed in the historical event as it's written in Judges, could look at that and say that that was a self-fulfilling prophecy, that the fact that the Midianites were so terrified that they were going to be defeated is what ultimately led to them being defeated. And I think as Christians, we do that to ourselves. And I think it's also important to remember self-fulfilling prophecies can be for positive or negative things.
I think, yeah, this is self-fulfilling prophecy. So our son was out shooting pucks, and stop me if I've shared this before, like recently. I feel like maybe I did. Have I shared it?
I think you did, but I think it was on True Crime Junkies because we
Oh, yeah, yeah,
recently
yeah.
talked about an episode about like the power of positive thinking and this
Suggestion. And
like
okay.
yes,
Yes. So that was
different
it. So if
podcast,
you're
same
not,
story.
yeah,
So go for it.
if you're not a Christian True Crime Junkies listener, this will be new. If you are, then it won't, but that's okay. So he went out, he was shooting pucks and at the net we have in our backyard. And he has this little radar gun that sort of like gauges the speed of the pucks. So he was trying to make it over 70 miles an hour, and he was getting like 68, 68, 68 was like the top. And he said, as soon as I get to 70, I'll be able to do it a bunch. Like,
Hmm.
because he knows, he kind of knows, like,
Yeah,
because I'll know it's possible. And
yeah,
so that's sort of a similar thing, like
it
basically. So
is.
he finally,
Hmm.
he inched up 69 and then 70. And then like he was able to shoot a few more at 70 miles an hour because he knew that was possible. And so I don't know, that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy might be having the mindset, there's no way I can get over 70. 68 is kind of
Hmm.
the max.
Right. Okay, wait a minute. I am shocked right now because you told this story and I was like, okay, that's a great example. And then I started to think 70 miles an hour, that's actually pretty fast. And then I realized this is not on ice that we're talking about,
It's on fake
right?
ice. So we
Uh-huh.
have little, like the preschool, like square mats that
Mm-hmm.
interlock with the little
Mm-hmm.
fingers that interlock together. We have that, only it's fake ice. It's not,
Okay.
you can't skate on it. There's some that they make you can,
Okay.
but this you can't skate on. But it's just basically like a certain kind of plastic that mimics
Okay.
the ice.
Okay.
So we have a big pad of that. And so they'll stand there on the pad with the pucks and shoot it. And then it goes, 5 feet,
Mm-hmm.
and then they lift the puck anyway. So,
Right.
it goes a little bit and then lifts. And
Uh-huh.
so, yeah, that's how he can get it going faster because there's way less friction than like the concrete. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. I mean, even on ice or an ice equivalent, 70 miles an hour, that is really fast.
Yeah. He's got a pretty strong shot.
That's cool. That is very cool. So, yeah, when we talk about self-fulfilling prophecies, have you, like, I know Christians don't love the word jinx, and I don't either because it does bring superstition, but I think that sometimes the idea maybe comes from the same root. It's this idea of, okay, if you believe something like, that's why I'm not the kind of person who believes in jinxes. Like, there are times where, even with Christians, I'll say something like, it has been a great week. We haven't had any days under 30 below. And they'll be like, shh, 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 don't say that. Don't talk like that because that's going to make it happen. And I've just decided to adopt the mindset of the more I call out wonderful things that happen in my life, the more grateful I am. And that, I mean, that could be a period. That could be enough right there. But why in the world would that make God less likely to want to keep on blessing me, right? So can you think of any times in your life where you've kind of fallen into traps like this, either with like self-fulfilling prophecies of your own or anything along the lines of what we're talking about?
Yes. One really interesting thing for me is I always tell people that I'm really bad with names, that I'll remember a face. I'm good with voices. Like I'm really good with voices. Like, if I'm
Mm.
watching a movie and I hear someone talking, I'm
Mm.
like, oh, that's so and so, but I don't remember their name. Like I'll connect the dots and be like,
Mhm.
what's that actor's name? But I'll know that it's the same person. So anyway, I've gotten into this habit of just being like, I'm really bad with names. But I remember one time, and it was in high school, and I was at a party, and I decided, like, I basically said, I'm going to be good with names.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I focused on the people, and I even told it to someone. I'm like, I'm going to remember everyone's name, like that.
Mhm.
And I actually was. It was weird. It
Yeah.
was like, as soon as I like
Tell
made that
yourself.
intention for that to be a
Mhm.
priority, I
Mhm.
actually, and so I look back on that and I think, you know what? If I could do that on command,
Mhm.
maybe in general, I don't focus on names enough and I let them go
Yeah.
in one ear and out the other. Kind of like when I ask my kids what
Mhm.
they want, for a snack and I give them three options and then I don't listen. I don't pay attention to what they say.
Uh-huh.
Um, but it's like what you focus on can particularly be done. So I've been, I think I've been trying to tell myself things like, because tell stories about myself. My stories are,
Mhm.
I'm disorganized. It's hard for me to keep my house clean.
Mhm.
Um, I am never on time. Just name the things. And
Yeah.
I've created these stories about myself and I live up to them unless
Mhm.
I choose to say something different.
Yeah.
And this whole conversation is making me thinking that I would like to not only say, oh, like this is going to be the exception to the rule. I'm going to overcome this one day by saying, oh, I'm going to be organized today. But, just create different narratives, like replace the
Mhm.
old narratives. And I know a lot of people have said that you need to do this, um, but it's powerful for sure.
It
And
is.
yeah,
Yeah. I know with names, because I've gotten to where I can catch myself before I say something that I think might be a self-fulfilling prophecy. I
you're
think
really
it
good, by
was,
the way, I notice very much like you're very particular about your word selection. And I love that.
mm,
And it has, over the years, whether I've said it or not, I've noticed it.
hmm
And it really has been a good example for me. Anything from like, there are certain words that you won't say. Like, I'm trying to
hmm
think of the ones like
Lazy's the biggest one. Lazy and
lazy.
procrastinate. Those are the two that
I
I,
I said something about lazy and like the look on your face. I was
I
like,
know.
I said something wrong. And that was like early on, I think. It's been years, but it was
Mhm,
early on
mhm.
in that whole, and then you kind of explained.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I love that.
Yeah.
I really am the kind of person that interrupts a lot.
No, you are
Just
the
kidding.
kind of person who has amazing ideas and can't wait to see them. And to be fair, since I do a little bit more audio edits right now, like I interrupt you all the time. So, but I learned about being particular with my language, especially when the kids were little. And some of it was because we were around so many medical specialists, and I was every time one of them would say something like, "Oh, well, it doesn't matter because he's not going to ever do this." Like
Oof.
it wasn't just a cringe. It was, I am going to take this curse that you are throwing at my child, and I am going to be the force field that is immediately going to surround our entire family from those words. You
I
know what I
love
mean?
that. That is so good.
And there was also a parenting philosophy. I'm sure you came across it too. I think it ties a tiny bit into maybe a little bit of gentle parenting, which I never got like super into. But the idea is if you're, let's say, your 4-year-old's at, was it Valley of the Sun or Valley of the Moon Park in Anchorage?
Valley of the
Which one is?
Moon.
Okay. And do you remember how it had that super tall
Oh, yeah.
tower? Like it looked like
Yes.
100 feet or higher. And
Yes.
kids would love to climb up it. And I would always stop myself. For our oldest, he was always our climber, just climbing everything. And what I was taught by other moms, kind of by example, but I think even sometimes like deliberately, not to say was, don't do that because you'll fall.
Right.
Because the minute they hear in their brain, oh, mom says I'm going to fall, mom is an authority figure. Does it mean 100% of the time it will make them fall? No. Does it mean that their brains will be more likely for them to fall? I think it absolutely does,
Mm-hmm.
especially since as the mom of a young child, you are seen as such an authority. And so you could say something like, don't run on the ice because it's not safe. But you wouldn't, under this philosophy, you wouldn't say, don't run on the ice because you'll fall and break your arm. Right? That is because in a way, that's like a mini curse. That's telling them if you do this thing, then you are more likely to fall and break your arm. So I definitely want to put limits around this because I think that the philosophy gets very abused. And even in Christian circles, and maybe even especially in Christian circles, I almost love to think of this philosophy as connected to the Bible as staying hydrated for your health is connected to the Bible. Like, I don't see them as enmeshed, and they're also not contradictory.
Mm-hmm.
Where I see danger is when somebody says, "Oh, if you tell your child, don't don't jump on that rock or you'll fall and crack your head open," then God's going to hear you and he's going to make them fall and crack their head open.
Right.
Right? Like,
Or the power of your words apart from God is going to make that happen because then that
mhm.
even puts the power on you and your words
Right.
in
Mhm.
a kind of witchcraft sense, as
Yes.
opposed to just in like the general biblical or non biblical sense
Mhm.
of keep it positive and it will
Yeah.
not be negative. I don't know.
Yeah. And it can be abused in Christianity when you try to use positive thinking to twist God's arm,
Mhm.
right? So just affirmations, in my opinion, are great, but they can go overboard if you're believing in the power of the words that you're saying outside of God, or if you're using them for just very selfish motivation. So that's kind of the limits that I put on it. I don't want to make it so that like God has decreed. I just think that this is kind of general good common sense. Like don't swear at your kids and don't tell them they're bad at math. Like to me, that's as simple as it has to be or as complicated as it has to be. But also be careful. If you wouldn't say it to your kid, don't say it to yourself, even internally. And the flip side, because so many of us are raised to be so scared of pride that we have the opposite. We would have a hard time looking in the mirror and saying, I, Jamie Hampton, am organized and peaceful and great at podcasting and a wonderful mom. Like, we're afraid that by saying those words, we might fall into pride. And we have this sense, and again, I think this is where this idea of jinxing comes in. We have this sense that the minute we get prideful, God's going to come and like he's just waiting for us to show that tiny smidge of pride so he can smack us down. And if you think about like the way you think of your children, there was never a moment where anything even remotely like that feeling came into you. And so, like, if we being sinful parents don't think that about our kids, there's no way God's thinking about that. And so, the way I see it, if you wouldn't say, if it's negative words that you would not tell your child, don't tell it to yourself. Similarly, if it's positive words that you think your children deserve to hear, tell it to yourself. You know, I think there's a huge difference between pride and pride, and I wish we had better words. You know, there is the difference of like, Jamie, I am proud of you for doing all the podcasting stuff you do. And I am so proudfully arrogant because I'm the very best podcast co-host and Jamie chose me, right? Those are two different kinds of pride,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have two different words for them. The kind of paternal pride, like you did something that bears acknowledgement, so let's acknowledge it. I don't think I think that is so separate from what God is warning us against when he tells us to remain humble, that
Mm-hmm.
it's like saying, um, you know, it's a sin to wear blue. Like it's just, it's so out of left field. Like they're not even related to each other.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think it's one of those things where it is hard for us sometimes to separate those two things, especially as
Mm,
women. And
yeah.
yeah, but I think it's healthy to think about it and try to practice it.
Yeah, definitely. So, in addition to being careful about the words we say, how could we tie this into practical takeaways for our prayer lives?
I don't know. I think maybe as we not being afraid to pray big, I feel like sometimes I limit God by the limitations of either what has been done before, what seems possible, going back to the 70 miles an hour thing. If if I am basically thinking that I want to ask God for something, let's say that I have limited God based on what has happened
Mhm.
before, what I expect
Yeah.
as the status quo. And I
Mhm.
think by asking bigger, we are doing the same thing as if we are, that 70 miles an hour being the limit.
Yeah.
As long as I believe that 70 miles an hour is the limit, I'm never going to get past it.
Mhm.
So if I ask above that, knowing that the sky is the limit, and then, it gives God
Mhm.
more room to operate in ways that are
Yeah.
bigger and
Uh-huh.
more. And I'm not talking specifically about prosperity, I'm talking about anything, whether it's, I
Mhm.
prayed for this person for 10 years and they have not come to Christ. Now I'm praying for this person, and I know, of course, God's not going to really move in their
Mhm.
lives for a very, very, very long time, but
Yeah.
expecting more, opening the doors maybe for God to move. I don't know. Do you have any ideas?
I think about this being used in, if not like in our prayers, I could see it definitely be used in how we think about ourselves as women who pray. So if you always tell yourself, I'm really disorganized in my prayers, or the minute someone gives me a prayer request, I'm going to forget it. What I've trained myself to do with names, because I have a really hard time remembering people's names. And if it's somebody that it's really important for me to remember, when I'm introduced to them, I will look them in the eye and I'll say, Megan. Okay, I'm going to remember that. And so I'm basically making a commitment to them
Yeah.
that I'm going to remember their name. And so if you tell yourself, yeah, this missionary is going to come and I'm going to feel so inspired to pray for them and I'm never going to remember it again. Okay, Instead, tell yourself, I'm going to remember to pray for this person, or go and tell them, I'm going to remember to pray for you. Sometimes I forget, but right now with you, I'm standing here right now and I remember that I'm going to remember.
Mhm.
And so, whatever blocks you have, whatever stories you tell yourself about the kind of prayer woman you are, I would examine and ask if there are limiting beliefs there, or if those are turning into self-fulfilling prophecies. Oh,
Mhm.
whenever I pray for this, life gets worse. Whenever I pray for patience, God sends something terrible to me. Is that true? No. Like that actually is a falsehood. Like, I'm sorry to everybody who has said it either in seriousness or in jest. That's just not true. And there is nothing that you will show me in scripture that tells me that anybody who prays for patience is going to experience tribulation. Because what the Bible says is the rain falls on the just and unjust. And so, whatever it is, sometimes I know you had a blog post that resonated with so many people. And it was this idea of, if I start really praying for this person, I'm almost afraid that God's going to make their life bad. Like, let's say you're praying for a prodigal. I don't want to pray for them to come to Christ because I know they've got to hit rock bottom before they come to Christ. And I just feel so bad having them go through that. Mm? Does the Bible say that every single prodigal must hit rock bottom before they come to Christ? I don't see that anywhere. And so we can re examine how the beliefs that we have, or even the superstitions we have about prayer or about the power of our prayers, can be impacting our beliefs.
Yeah, well, another kind of along those same lines is this idea that if I start praying more, or if I start doing this work of God, then I'm going to become a target for the enemy.
Hmm.
And that is a superstitious belief that
Hmm.
can kind of, sort of similar to the praying for someone that they're going to go through hard times, but just
Yeah.
kind of being afraid to pray in general because you think
Yeah.
that you're going to become, have a target on your back. That can
Hmm.
definitely be, and it can be self-fulfilling prophecy, not because
Absolutely.
of necessarily attack, but just confirmation bias. You just start to notice, oh, I stubbed my toe this morning and then I lost
Yep.
my toothbrush and then I, slammed my
Exactly.
finger in the door on the way out, so
Things that would have happened no matter what.
right.
But since you're looking for them, you're like,
Mhm.
oh, this, like I would have had a terrible week after eating dairy ice cream for a whole week. Like, with my body being the way it is, there is no way short of a truly divine miracle that I wouldn't have had all the symptoms that I had.
Mhm.
But because I was in my brain saying, every time I go and try to memorize the Bible, this happens, I'm I'm looking out for it.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, let's go ahead and close with our blessing and benediction. May the Lord open the eyes of your heart and fill you with wisdom in the inmost places. May the glorious Father grant you a spirit of wisdom and revelation so you may know Christ, who has become for us wisdom from God. In the areas of your life in need of guidance, may God grant you his wisdom in abundance so that you will not lean on your own insight, but rely on the full riches of complete understanding which are yours in abundance through Christ.
And her benediction comes from Psalm 134, verse 3. May the Lord bless you from Zion, he who made heaven and earth. Amen.